Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this beautiful day here in Brisbane on the 9th day of June 2023. And looking at the temperature there, today is going to be sunny. At the moment, it's 17 degrees. It's tipped to go up to 22 later in the day. So there you are, ladies and gentlemen, up to date on Australian Indian Radio. As usual, it's wonderful to have your company. So let's take a look at some of the news that's today. First of all, let's take a look at the news in brief, courtesy of ABC.
4 toddlers and 2 adults have been injured in a mass stabbing in the French Alps. The attack happened on a sunny morning in Annecy, where children and their parents were playing in a park. The injured children are between 22 months and 3 years old. The 2 adults injured are in their 70s. Police have arrested the alleged attacker. They say he's a 31-year-old Syrian national who'd been granted refugee status by Sweden. They're yet to determine a motive. Ukrainian officials say at least 9 people have been wounded after Russian forces shelled the flooded city of Kherson during evacuations. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has visited the region and appealed for an international effort to help people trapped in floodwaters in Russian-occupied territory. Roughly 600 square kilometres of land is underwater after the destruction of the Nova Kakhovka Dam. A Queensland man released from an Indonesian prison this week has been cleared by authorities to leave the country after a delay of several days. Bodie Risby-Jones was locked up in Aceh province since late April and was facing up to 5 years behind bars. He'll be allowed to fly home to Australia this weekend. Hundreds of forest fires continue to burn across Canada this morning amid the country's worst ever start to the wildfire season. Thousands have been forced from their homes and a thick smoky haze is covering a large area of Canada and the United States. Several countries, including Australia, have sent personnel to assist.
So there you are, ladies and gentlemen, up to date, and that's devastating fire there in Canada, and that boy in Australian boy in Indonesia with the cheeky look on his face here, he is going to be released to come back to Australia. Well, right now, 2 Australian cities have been shaken by earthquakes. This is happening a little bit too close these days.
Australia is right in the middle of the tectonic plate, so we're in the Australian plate, and Australia is made up of continental lithosphere. So we're actually quite far away from the plate boundary. So New Zealand to our east is where the plate boundary is located. And we also have, of course, the plate boundary to the north, which is also very seismically active, is in Indonesia and Southeast Asia, and then farther to the west, in the Indian Ocean is the other extent of the Australian plate. So most of the earthquakes occur at the plate boundary, where the plates are moving past one another. But we do have earthquakes within the Australian plate in Australia, continental Australia as well.
Yeah, and so are they along established fault lines, and there are spots where you can expect to get more quake activity because there are fault lines, or is it all pretty random?
So there's faults throughout the Australian crust. Some of them we do know where they are, and others that we don't. However, we do have areas that are more seismically active than others. The map that you're showing there is a great example. So that we do have the most frequent earthquakes occur in Western Australia, but we also have some up in the Flinders Ranges of South Australia as well. So those are the regions that have more small earthquakes relative to other places. However, they do occur across the entire continent.
And why do more occur in those red zones as we saw on those maps? Are there more fault lines there, or can you explain the geology of those spots for us?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. And in southwest WA, I have an experiment going on there where we have many seismometers out to record these small events and also try to better understand the structure, where the faults are located, why we have these reoccurring earthquakes. But that is kind of an ongoing question of why they occur in these particular areas rather than others. And that in WA in particular is quite exciting, interesting research because it's part of the very oldest part of the Australian continent, and so that's quite unusual. But there are still faults there, and it's actually the forces at the edge of this plate can be transmitted into the interior of Australia, and that's why we do get these earthquakes within Australia.
So there you are, up to date on Australian Indian Radio. So those fault lines is what causes those seismic activities, a lot happening. And many times, is this unpredictable, as they said, that many areas are known, many fault lines are known, but there are many also unknown. So as the reporter was asking that, are there random activities? Yes, there are too. Well, right now, whenever it comes to any problem, there's everyone who becomes a guru. Right now, the problem is housing in Australia as well, apart from labour shortage and few other things as well, cost of living and everything else. But on housing, everyone seems to be a guru. But here, let's take a look at this report as to what might be the solution.
Julie Collins, welcome to 7:30.
Thank you, Sarah.
Now, the target of the Housing Australia Future Fund is to build 30,000 social and affordable homes over 5 years. The research suggests that the actual need is much bigger than that. How did you come up with that figure?
We obviously took to the election a $10 billion Housing Australia Future Fund with an ambition to build 30,000 social and affordable homes in the first 5 years of the fund. The idea, of course, is that returns from the fund are there in perpetuity, adding to social and affordable housing each and every year. The Housing Australia Future Fund is a critical but one part of the government's broad, ambitious housing agenda. We're obviously doing a lot more than just the Housing Australia Future Fund, but the Future Fund is critical in terms of leveraging investments from other tiers of government and, of course, institutional investment and building the capacity of community housing providers right across the country.
Let me just ask you this. If you're going to invest $500 million a year to build 30,000 homes over 5 years, that means you're planning to spend $83,000 per home. Can you build a home in Australia for $83,000?
Well, that's obviously the Commonwealth's contribution. As I said, it's about leveraging other investments from other tiers of government. It's about leveraging investments from community housing providers, and it's about leveraging institutional investment into social and affordable housing. What we want to do is create social and affordable housing as investment asset classes in Australia. What we want to do is get more homes on the ground more quickly. And the whole point of the fund and the way we've designed it this way is so that it's there in perpetuity with returns each and every year, providing long-term investments and long-term certainty for investors and indeed for community housing providers.
When will the first home be built?
Well, that will depend on how fast we get the fund through the Parliament. We, of course, already have homes on the ground, going on the ground today from the $575 million that we unlocked last year out of the Jobs and Skills Summit. And, of course, we've got our National Housing Accord, which starts on 1 July 2024.
I beg your pardon, in relation to this particular fund, assuming that you do get it through, when would the first home be built?
Well, it'll take a little while for those returns to come through, so the sooner we can get the fund through, the sooner we can get homes on the ground. These types of plans and projects take quite a while to get off the ground, so as soon as the bill is passed, we need Housing Australia to be going out there, working with all of the providers, working with the sector, so that we have concrete plans, so as soon as the money's able to flow, we have houses going under construction straight away.
And just briefly, how long do you think that will take?
Well, it will take a few months to get the returns from the fund. We anticipate probably in the first 12 months we'd get a return, but as I said, it's just part of our broader housing policy, and we already have homes going on the ground today because we unlocked that $575 million immediately late last year.
Now, you need the support of the Greens to pass the bill. They made a concession last week. How close are you to a deal?
We're, of course, talking to parliamentarians right across the Parliament. When we got the bill through the House of Representatives, we got support of the majority of the crossbench, indeed all of the crossbench except the Greens, and we even had one Liberal member cross the floor and support the bill. I think people know that we need to get homes on the ground. We have a serious supply issue in Australia today. We need to get more homes on the ground more quickly, but we need to do it in a responsible way, working with the construction sector and working with community housing providers, and that's what we want to do. And we're busy talking to people right across the Parliament. We got a letter with 8 concerns by the crossbench in the Senate. We have addressed all of those 8 concerns, and we're continuing to have discussions in good faith across the Parliament.
Now,
so there you are, ladies and gentlemen. Because there was a election promise, it's being delivered, and of course, as the Lord Tingle asked that how did we come with that number? Is that going to solve our problem? It will solve it to a degree, but I don't think that's the complete solution. And from past experience when we looked at all the Housing Commission homes and other things of the estate years, after a while, they become a not so desirable location once things change. So that's something to consider as well. What it's going, the social housing, what would it look like? What would it feel in the future as well? Right now, going to Western Australia, well, the new Premier has and reshuffled his cabinet.
Same place, same problems, only a decade apart. In 2013, detainees rioted at Banksia Hill, and the then Shadow Minister had plenty of ideas.
They've been in charge for 5 years. If there is a mess in the prisons, if there's a mess in the Corrective Services Department, they created it.
After 8 years on the portfolio in opposition, advocacy groups were disappointed Paul Papalia didn't keep corrections when Labor took government.
He was very much consultative, very much engaging with the sector, both the community sector as well as the Aboriginal leadership around justice issues.
Well, I think Bill Johnson would love the fact that he's lost corrective services. I suspect he wasn't enjoying it, and it was certainly not a good outcome for the state. Let's hope that Paul Papalia might just manage to do a better job.
Treasury, the other major shift, landing with Rita Safiotti.
Rita's an economist and a former Treasury official, and having worked closely with her through our budget committee process over the last 6 years, I know our budget will be in safe hands.
But the opposition points to Metronet blowouts, with Miss Safiotti keeping transport and picking up tourism.
Rita Safiotti absolutely has got too much on her plate.
But the minister is also offloading portfolios, with planning to go to the housing minister, while new Minister David Michael picks up local government from John Kerry and takes ports off Rita Safiotti's hands.
I'm very confident, extremely confident, to be able to manage it all.
We're told that this cabinet has the right balance of junior and senior members, but the Labor government has a massive backbench, and a number of those MPs will also be itching for their own spot on cabinet, and it's now up to Roger Cook to keep them happy and in line. James Carmody, ABC News.
Very good reporting there by James Carmody all the time. I love his reporting. It's very, very good. All right, now let's look at the next report where we look at police with a lot of respect here in Australia, but given the task that they have at hand, how much force is too much force if they are saving us and protecting the law?
Don't leave the house much. I walk the dogs. That's about it.
It's been 6 years since an encounter with police changed Nathan Cross's life. He can't work and struggles to remember simple things.
Organisation skills, have none anymore. Motivation's gone.
He lives in one of the most beautiful parts of the country, but is often afraid to leave his home.
When I see a police car, I panic, and it takes about 15 to 20 minutes before I come back to reality and can think normal and my wife can talk to me again.
Nathan Cross was drunk, verbally abusive and in breach of a curfew when he was arrested by 4 police officers in a backyard near his home in the South Australian town of Victor Harbor in 2017.
I was arrested, put in handcuffs, and when we were taken to the police station, I was mouthy. I admit that.
In court, police would later allege they feared Cross, who was handcuffed, was trying to headbutt or spit at them.
Then was smashed into a counter at full pace by a police officer. Then I was charged with assault.
They said he struck the counter accidentally when police pushed him off balance. Police dragged their prisoner to a cell and called an ambulance, cleaning up his blood while they waited. They then went with Nathan Cross to Victor Harbor Hospital.
Ended up with staples in the side of my head, concussion, and basically the front lobe of my brain is now black.
Police charged Nathan Cross with assault, even though he was the one who had been injured. After a 3-year legal battle, a magistrate eventually found him not guilty. Nathan Cross says the trial took a toll on his mental and physical health.
Stress was unbelievable. I don't sleep much. I don't go to bed till like 3 o'clock in the morning now. Sit up stressing. Yeah. Just affected almost everything in my life. My relationship with my kids, my families. Yeah.
In court, the magistrate rejected police testimony, finding all but one of the officers were not candid, unreliable or misleading in their evidence. SA Police told 7:30 a senior member of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions found criminal charges against them were not warranted.
South Australia Police receive an average of 287 complaints about excessive force every year, out of around 22,000 annual arrests. In the past decade, 4 police have been found guilty of assault for offences committed while on duty. One officer was dismissed after an internal disciplinary process.
In the last decade, the SA government has spent $4.2 million settling the lawsuits of 20 people who've sued police for allegedly injuring them. 6 years ago, Alexander Wilding, who is on the autism spectrum, also had an encounter with SA Police. He was charged with assaulting police after he was arrested in Adelaide's main railway station. The exchange became heated when Alex was unable to show a concession card for his ticket.
He's just started yelling at me like he was a drill instructor and I was a recruit for the military.
Police alleged Alex Wilding punched the officer, charged towards him and forced him onto the ground. But CCTV footage of the incident shows something different. Alex Wilding grapples with the officer, then is pushed to the floor. After lengthy negotiations, police drop charges of assaulting and hindering police. Alexander Wilding pleaded guilty to resisting arrest and failing to provide his particulars. Alex and Nathan both sued police, resulting in settlements, which they can't speak about. Their lawyer, Andrew Carpenter, says theirs are not isolated cases. He says he deals with about 10 such cases per year.
My experience is whenever a police officer has assaulted someone or accused of assaulting someone is they'll almost immediately lay charges for assault of police against them.
But
So there you are, where do we like the balance? And that's a lot of money that has been paid out in lawsuits. So we have to look at many things, the mental status of the people there at that time. And when you are in a confrontation state, how do you react? And you have to act on the spur of the moment as well. So there are a few things that really need to be taken into account. Now, the other topic that has been very topical and many people have been talking about, it's the ban of the Nazi symbol. Many times that symbol had been mistaken with the Hindu swastika, but it's the federal court is going to introduce a national ban on Nazi symbol.
Hate-filled gestures embraced by some far-right activists in a movement that's gained traction among an extremist minority.
There is no place in Australia for symbols that glorify the horrors of the Holocaust.
Various Nazi symbolism is already illegal in Victoria and New South Wales following high-profile protests, and similar legislation's also been introduced in several other states and territories. Next week, the Federal Attorney-General will introduce a bill to criminalise the public display and sale of the Nazi Hakenkreuz and SS hate symbols.
We will not tolerate this kind of conduct. Today, the Albanese government is acting.
The penalty, up to 12 months jail.
Today is a day for the history books. A terrible wrong has been made right.
The legislation will stop short of banning the Nazi salute, so the opposition's signalling amendments.
You must include in the bill the prohibition of the salute if you're going to be serious about addressing what the government says is a rising problem.
The federal government insists the Nazi salute is a matter for the states to police. It's also defended the time taken to reach this point, saying it's vital the ban is well targeted and effective. Use of the symbols by museums, academics and religious groups will be exempt. Meanwhile, Jewish groups argue the crackdown is treating the symptom of a much larger problem and are calling for more education. Nicole Hegarty, ABC News, Canberra.
Thanks, Nicole. Yes, there's more education that's needed, and it's been a ongoing process that we've got the distinction between swastika and the Haken cross, which is the Nazi symbol. And good to see that now the politicians, the news readers and everyone are aware of that, and even this post which is on there yesterday had to be corrected because we are working with the Queensland Coalition, and as soon as we see anything like that, we raise concerns. Well, right now research has shown that Australians with COVID can cause brain fog.
Is when the virus infects our brain, the brain cells actually start fusing together into this giant multicellular structures, and with that actually causes a lot of brain functions to not happen, and with that, that's what you see with the long COVID symptoms.
But not all of us have all of the post-COVID symptoms though, do we? We don't all lose our sense of taste and smell, so what's happening there?
So if I were to speculate that, because research is obviously not quite there yet, I would say that the virus in different individuals can affect different parts of the brain. And with that, with some individuals that develop the loss in sense of taste and smell, I would imagine that the virus is wreaking havoc in these brain areas.
And is this fusion of brain cells, so particular to the COVID virus, or does it occur with other viruses?
Actually, there are a lot of viruses that cause neurological symptoms. So there are things like HIV, rabies, Japanese encephalitis virus, everything that causes brain to develop symptoms like measles as well, and herpes simplex, even our chickenpox virus. So it's actually not just isolated to the COVID virus.
So the question everybody wants to know the answer to, I guess, is this permanent? Do we know what's likely to happen over time?
You asked me a really interesting and really tricky question. I would imagine that if I were to think about it now, knowing what I know, I would say that it's quite permanent. And over time, I can imagine that these large structures of cells actually eventually might die because they don't get to do what they're supposed to do. So, yeah.
That's not good news for many who suffer these post-COVID symptoms, long COVID. Now, for this research, I understand that you made mini brains to experiment on. Tell us a bit about that.
So what we did was we took human stem cells and then we add different factors to give the cells the message that they need and the direction that they need to develop into different brain cells. And what they then go on to do is they then self-assemble into this 3D structure in a culture dish. And it's a really powerful tool because neuroscientists like myself can use these mini brains to then study our brain function in a culture dish in a very human relevant way.
So it opens the door to much more research into brain conditions and diseases then?
Yes, so we actually run a study and a couple of studies actually on drug development to look at, to identify drugs that could help in COVID, and also in our main area of research is dementia.
Right, so if you have had COVID and if you cannot think properly, or it could mean that some part of your brain is not working in the way that it's supposed to be. So there you are, that's research there. Wow, what a lot of research is going into those small things where they replicate the brains and try and look at all the cells and everything happens. I hope there's some positive outcomes out of those research in prevention and cure. Right now, it's time to go to some of our functions and events. There you are, ladies and gentlemen, up to date on Australian Indian Radio. And hey, it's been wonderful having your company this morning. 19 degrees now, it's already gone to. We began with 17, and it's so wonderful to see you. Until tomorrow, it's goodbye from us. And as I've said before, that if you ever have any topics that you'd like to discuss, or any events that you'd like to discuss about, any concerns within the community which you would like to raise, we are here. So all you need to do is send us a message. We can get you into the studio or get you here via a video link. Either of the way, we'd like to hear from you. That's the main thing. The key is we need to get the message out. We need to discuss. We need to talk about this, have a conversation. Until tomorrow, it's goodbye from us.